Hello, and welcome to Innovative Design for Inclusive Virtual Learning. My name is Nick Brzezinski, and I'm a faculty member and facilitator with Innovazing and Mavasive Leadership Institute. Today, I am joined by Salima Villani. And Salima, do you want to give a brief introduction?
Sure. Thank you, Nick. I'm Salima Villani, and I'm also with Innovazing and Mavasive Leadership Institute. I'm really passionate about social entrepreneurship and empowering the developing world through innovation and technology.
Awesome. I'll offer a brief background and introduction to the design thinking process, and then we're going to jump into a real-life scenario using design thinking to design inclusive virtual learning tools. The goal of this training and experience is to help you think outside the box when you're working on creating some of those virtual learning tools that are so necessary today with virtual learning booming around the world. Once we get into the steps of the design thinking process, I'll encourage you to pause so you can work and follow along at your own pace. So first, let's define what design thinking is. Design thinking is a creative process that allows you to iteratively, which means in steps or in stages, create innovative solutions to complex problems by putting the user's need first. Design thinking is also known as human-centric design. This is a definition that I really like of design thinking from someone named Eli Woolery and his Design Thinking Handbook. Design thinking is more than a methodology or framework. It combines the problem-solving roots of design with a deep empathy for the user. And so, as you can see, design thinking is a 5-stage process. The first stage is empathize. Second stage is define. The third stage is ideate. Fourth stage is prototype. And the fifth stage is test. A little bit more information on design thinking. Design thinking is great when working with complex problems, uncertainty, unpredictability, and it is a nonlinear process, which counters the traditional design process. The old way, again, was very linear. It was all or nothing. Think about it. Designers, let's say designing a chair, would get together and create the chair, ship the chair, and then have those that were going to buy the chair experience it for the first time after they've already purchased it. Maybe the chair didn't work so well for the person that bought it. So that could be a very expensive process to go through if you're not meeting the user's needs. Whereas the new way with design thinking, it's a cyclical process. You are shipping often and iterating. So in this, the designers would use the learners or the users in their design process so they can make sure that they're designing products and, in our context, learning tools that are meeting the needs of the learners and the users. Design thinking helps designers learn from the users at the start of the process.
So now we're going to look into who uses design thinking. Design thinking is used in many different ways and across all sorts of industries, from academia to social impact to business. How is it used in the social impact world, since that's the world we're really focused on? Let's look at the Philippines. An entrepreneur from the Philippines launched a project that installed solar-powered lamps made of plastic bottles and water to light over 15,000 homes in dark, cramped slum housing. These lamps served as an economically viable alternative to glass windows. We then have this example from Rwanda, where an architecture firm, Partners in Health, which is a public health nonprofit, and the Rwandan Ministry of Health partnered to design and build a state-of-the-art hospital in Rwanda tailored to the people's needs. It was made with local materials and 100% local labor at 2/3 the cost, saving not only $2 million in construction fees, but also providing over 4,000 jobs. And then this is my favorite example because it's a study that I worked on myself with the World Bank. And we were really trying to figure out how can we improve refugee livelihoods in the Middle East and North Africa by using agriculture technology. How can we move away from traditional farming and agriculture? And we, went to the field, we talked to the people, we went to Israel, we went to Palestine, we went and traveled and talked to the refugees because the refugees are the users. And we came up with this really innovative solution, which wasn't, disruptive technology, but rather a very low-tech solution, which is called hydroponics. And we took it down a notch to simplified hydroponics and using very basic materials like PVC pipes, solar panels, growing medium, 90% less water than traditional agriculture. And, we didn't have to rely on land either. We could create this this method of growing nutritious produce like lettuce and tomatoes and strawberries and help them increase their nutrition, tackle food insecurity, tackle all sorts of issues in water scarce countries. And now I'd like to hand it over to Nick, who's going to take us through the design sprint.
Okay. As mentioned, we're going to get some real life application for some of these design thinking tools that you're learning right now. So first, I would like to outline the scenario that we're going to be using today in this design sprint. In this scenario, we need to design a virtual learning tool that is inclusive and human-centered in order to maximize its impact and learning outcome for diverse audiences. So the design challenge is, how might we create a virtual learning experience to reach a diverse audience and meet their needs?
Just to give a little bit of context, this is an example of a virtual learning tool. Oftentimes we use PowerPoints, and sometimes we think about visuals meaning just putting text up and putting images. And sometimes our PowerPoints can consist of a lot of text and images. And so we're like, is this the best way to teach people by just throwing them a lot of information, a lot of words? How does that feel to you? Just think about it. It feels to me a little bit like a lot of words. It's not really clear how the categories or how I can interpret this, how I can learn from this. What are the main takeaways from this? And so basically, this is an example of a PowerPoint, the before version, and this is what we did with it. And we really made it more visual. We tried to think about how we could turn it into some sort of graphic, or you can also turn a lot of these PowerPoints into infographics. There's so many creative things you can do. And it's just a matter of knowing how to use that information in a way that the person that's going to be reading or learning will best learn from. This is an example of one of our tools actually here at Innovazing. It's called the Epic Impact Plan. And it takes people, it's basically like a leadership tool to help people put together an action plan. And we had a lot of issues with this version because, as you can see, it was hard for people to fill out some of the spaces. It was confusing. Some of the feedback that we got was that there's not enough space to write, the name and the role. What does YN mean, which is yes, no. One of the main issues that we had was that it's a PDF, but it wasn't editable. So not everybody has a printer and can print this out and fill it out. How do people that don't have access to printers fill this out electronically? And so we came out with this editable PDF version after collecting all that feedback from the users and created this and have a lot more positive feedback from it.
Great. So now we can get started. And this is where you all get to jump in too. So again, the first stage in design thinking is to empathize. Empathy helps us develop a deep understanding of the users, or in this case, the learners and their needs. How do you get it? Well, there's a number of different ways. A popular way to gain empathy is to do interviews or have conversational interviews. You can also tell stories or listen to stories from the perspective of the learner. Journey and experience mapping, surveys, data analysis, all these are examples of really great methods to gain empathy for the learner. In order to gain empathy, it's helpful to ask questions. I mean, think about it. It makes sense. That's how you get information from someone else, is to ask them questions, which will then help them share things. So these are some basic but very, very helpful questions that you can ask the learner or user in order to better understand where they're coming from. Consider what are their needs, what are their wishes, ask them what about their goals are, and then reflect on those that inspired and emboldened the learner. What qualities did they possess? How does the learner best learn and retain information? And what insights do you have about the user? This can be helpful from both the designer's perspective as well as the learner, because designers are learners also. So think about learning instances from your life where what made it easy? When did you learn something that was really impactful? Or what made it challenging for you to learn in different environments in your life? That can help you then embed the learning back into your design process. So now that you have a better understanding of how to gain empathy from the learner, go ahead and gain empathy. Ask questions. Use any of those methods to better understand where the learner is coming from. Get in their shoes. See what it feels like. Listen to what it feels like. And that will help you with the design process. So if you're going to work along with us, go ahead and pause the recording and gain empathy. Welcome back from the empathy stage. I hope you're able to get a better perspective from the learner's perspective about the kinds of challenges that the learner is facing. Now we're going to move into step 2, which is define. The define stage is vital for coming up with a helpful and clear solution in the design thinking process. In the define stage, it's really important to clearly articulate the problem to be solved. And a unique part of the define stage is that we will be articulating the problem from the point of view of the user or from the point of view of the learner, as opposed to from the point of view of the designer or teacher. Here are some helpful questions to get to a very clarified and distinct problem statement. Make sure you're asking, and that you are asking the learner, what are your users' needs? Why are they unable to meet their needs? And please keep in mind, when you see user in any of these slides, that's referring to the learner in our scenario. And so once you ask those two questions and additional questions related to that to help you get insight, then you will be able to better reword the problem through the lens of your user, which will be our problem statement. So what do you say, Salima? What do you say we go ahead and kind of talk through this problem statement scenario? Because this is such an important step that can be, I know for me, it can be challenging at times. So if we are trying to think about, it seems like the future of work is kind of a very pressing topic currently. Is that true?
Yeah. So, we have several young students in elementary and high school who need to learn relevant skills so that they can transition smoothly into the future workforce.
Okay, that's helpful. So now we have a better understanding of who our learners or users would be in this scenario and what some of their needs are. Why may they not be able to meet those needs currently?
Yeah, so one of the reasons they're not able to meet their needs is because, well, first of all, we have the future of work that's rapidly changing. But the main reason is that traditional education has fallen behind with the pace of innovation and technology. And so learning and education needs to be more relevant to today's workforce and the trends.
Great. Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. So let's go ahead and try to put this in the form of the problem statement, which, as you can see, starts with the type of user. And again, please keep in mind when you're coming up with this problem statement, you are doing it from the point of view of the user or of the learner. So in the example Salima was just talking about, the user would be, what would you say, youth or young learners? Does that seem accurate to you?
Yeah, so I would say youth need a way to access practical and engaging tools because traditional methods are less effective.
Great. So there's a wonderfully concise, clearly articulated problem statement. The more clear that the problem statement is, the more clear your path to coming up with an effective solution will be.
So let's try it again. Actually, we can boil it down even further. I would say secondary students need a way to access practical and engaging learning tools because traditional teaching methods are less effective.
That's awesome. Makes sense to me. So now that we have a clear understanding of what the problem statement can and should look like, go ahead and pause the recording to work at your own pace to come up with your own problem statement relative to your specific scenario. Welcome back. How did it go? I hope you were able to come up with a problem statement from the point of view of the learner that makes sense and that will help you come up with an effective solution. Now let's move into step 3, which is the ideate phase. In the ideation phase, you're going to brainstorm potential solutions and then select one and develop that one. Of all of the phases, personally, the ideate phase is my favorite. This is where you can brainstorm, let thoughts go. No idea is too crazy or out there. And here are some helpful rules of brainstorming. Defer judgment. That means for yourself and also for others if you happen to be working around others. Don't judge yourself with the internal editor that might say, that's not a good idea or that doesn't make sense. This is your opportunity to just let go. So defer judgment against yourself or against others. Also, go for quantity. Let everything be free. It can often be helpful to use sticky notes or any other resources that you have around you to stimulate creative thought in your mind. So go for quantity. The more, the better. If you happen to be working in a group, it's also helpful to build on the ideas of others. So this would be yes-anding other ideas that you may hear or letting ideas that are happening around you inspire you to then build upon those. And finally, you really want to encourage wild ideas in yourself and in other people. In the ideation phase, this is where you're generating alternatives to test. So again, you want to generate as many ideas as you can. All ideas are welcome. And in order to stimulate your mind, draw, sketch, visualize, or use some of those other tools instead of writing. or hand in hand with writing. Whatever it takes for you to get your mind flowing. Occasionally, for myself, taking a walk around or closing my eyes and thinking about what the scenario is I want to come up with ideas for can be helpful for me. In the ideate phase, it's also very important to get feedback from your users or the learners in this scenario. Different ways that you're able to do that are to ask what worked, what did you like, what could be improved, what didn't you like as much, getting questions, and also coming up with new ideas. This slide right here is very helpful also for yourself as you're working through the design thinking phase as designers or as teachers to review after each step of design thinking. This is a way to check in with yourself and also other group members if you happen to be working in a group to see what you're learning from each phase and how you can course correct if necessary. So now that you have the information of what you need to do for the ideate phase, go ahead and pause the recording and let the ideas flow. Welcome back. I hope that the ideation was energizing and fun and freeing, as I know it always is for me. So now let's move on to step 4, which is the prototype phase. In prototyping, we will be designing a prototype to test all or part of our solution. And remember, from that ideate phase that we just completed, we came up with a lot of ideas and great potential solutions, but we're picking one. And that one is what we are going to move and pull into this prototype phase. So what is prototyping? Prototyping gives your users something to react to so you can learn what works and what doesn't right away. In this prototype phase, you're going to create cheap, quick artifacts or experiences that bring your idea to life for a user and then give them something to react to. This stage is all about failing quickly and cheaply so you can learn more about your user or the learner and come back to the table with a better idea. Prototyping also allows you to test out possible ideas before investing a lot of time and money into any one idea.
I can jump in here. So basically, when you're creating a prototype, it's important to think about it in different phases. And at a very early phase, it's great to start getting feedback on the overall outline or whatever you want to call it, whether it's a mock-up or blueprint, whether you're making a video, a PowerPoint, whatever tool you're creating, it's really important to get that feedback at an early stage when you're prototyping. And Nick will continue on with this, but you're going to have multiple prototypes before it gets to that right version.
Great. So now that you have a little bit better idea of what a prototype is, go ahead and make it, build it. Go ahead and pause the recording now to jump into the prototype phase. Welcome back. How did it go? So now that we've generated a prototype, we're going to go ahead and test the prototype. In the test phase, you engage in a continuous short cycle revision process using user feedback to continually improve design. So in the test phase, we will take that prototype and have the learner engaging with the prototype. Let's say if somehow in this process you were able to generate a very short course that users could potentially access online, then this is the phase where they would be using that course and offering you feedback about what it was like for them to access the course, to work through the various modules. So the test phase is all about interaction between the learner and the prototype and generating feedback, as much feedback as possible. Testing enables iterating on your prototype. So iteration is being able to work through different phases of development. Testing is not just about whether a user likes the solution. It's important to focus on what can be learned about the person in the process, and the person being the learner or the user. Testing is another form of empathy and being human-centered, in that you are engaging directly with the learner and thinking of and listening to the learner's perspective. Design thinking is an iterative process. So at the completion of the test phase, let's say if we were running through this entire scenario, we have the prototype, we go through the test phase, we generate the feedback, and then we take that feedback and return back to the ideate phase. So then the ideas that we are generating are based on feedback that we've already gotten from the user based on the test and the prototype that the user was testing. So the phase of iteration, or the cycle of iteration in design thinking, goes from test back to ideation. And then from that new ideation, you make a new prototype. And from that new prototype, you test it again, get new feedback, and again in short cycles through those 3 stages till you work closer and closer to the solution that is most effective for your problem. As mentioned after the ideate phase, it's vital to get feedback from your partners and also from yourself. So while working through all of this design thinking process, it can be very helpful to use this tool to be able to generate feedback. Asking yourself and asking learners, what worked? What did you like throughout the design thinking process? What could have been improved? What didn't you like as much? What questions came up? What new ideas came up? As you may have already realized, design thinking is all about generating feedback, taking that feedback in, and then allowing that feedback to adjust the course, the creation, and the design toward whatever solution is trying to be worked toward. So now, this is your opportunity to debrief. Ask yourself some of the questions that were just placed on the previous slide around generating feedback. What's this experience been like for you? What's been easy? What's been hard? What have you learned? What do you need to work on? The debrief is the place where the connection between the experience and reflection happens, which generates the learning and helps us move forward in a progressive way. This is a quote that came from Justin Farrell from the Stanford D School, one of the thought leaders in the design thinking process. Innovation is not an event, it is a human-centered process. And for me, there's a big emphasis on that word process. It's continual.
If you have any questions, feel free to shoot us an email. We'd be happy to answer. You can also find more about us at innovazing.com. And thank you so much for being here.
Happy designing.